Sales leakage. I ran into this term about 15 years ago from Kenichi Omei, who wrote the book The Mind of the Strategist, one of the best consulting books and CEO books, I might add, out there, and it's still being printed. But he talked about sales leakage. It wasn't, let me put my tools out of the way before I trip over them, but he didn't trademark it, so I did. Sales leakage, I found in most organizations, reduces sales gains, crushes momentum, drains productivity, one drip at a time in just about every organization's out there. Every single one of your organizations has some form of sales and marketing leakage. I didn't invent it. It is just there. Well, what happens is sales leakage creeps in slowly but surely in every organization. The first part of sales leakage I like to talk about is not weeding the garden. It's often said that weed them and reap, so to speak. But most organizations, 60-70% of the people aren't making quota on a regular basis. 30% of the sales managers are going to change jobs every 18 months to 24 months. When I go to these organizations the last couple of years, the number one thing I see is, yeah, we got to weed the garden. Yeah, we got people that aren't producing. They're telling me, I'm the consultant coming in, they're telling me, would you please go weed the garden for me? I get hired to weed the garden for people. They should be able to weed the garden themselves to a great extent, don't you think? Unfortunately, a lot of people are keeping people on that shouldn't be there, that should go on to another company, that should be contributing someplace else where they've got more enthusiasm to do it. But unfortunately, too many CEOs and presidents feel like, let's see, bad breath is probably better than no breath. So they keep, does that ring a bell with any of you? Does it ring a bell that there are people not making quota that you suspect could go someplace else, do a much better job, but they're just not able to do it for you? Well, that's kind of what happens. I go under the assumption only God can make a tree, but you're in charge of the seeds and the weeds, right? You're in charge of figuring out what grows and what you've got to weed out of the garden. So I suspect when you go back, you take a long, hard look at your sales force, and you look at those people that haven't been making quota. I'm not talking about people in the last 6 months. I'm talking about people that haven't made quota in a year. I've seen people that have had people in place that haven't made quota in 2 or 3 years. That their cost of sales is actually, they're losing money every time somebody makes a sale for them. Well, I don't want to change. I'm afraid. Fear, you're all CEOs. Fear should be something that you put behind a long time ago because that's where you got where you're at. You're risk takers. There's a place over here called El Camino Real High School. Notice on the bottom it says a continuation school, which I don't have children, and somebody told me after I made the first presentation, it's probably to Jeff's people, and they said, you realize that's a school for bad kids, you know, the kids that have to go to continuation school and what have you. But I was driving to a client one day, going to a meeting, and I saw this out front, but that's not what caught my attention. What caught my attention was this: no goals, no glory. No goals and no glory was painted on the side of their basketball court. There's a little red circle there that says no smoking too. But no goals and no glory. That's what they were teaching these people at this continuation school. Well, this fits right in with my next comment. This is Rodney Lorkin. I've met Rodney. He climbed a mountain here in California. It's off the bottom of the chart there. You can't see it, I don't think. But Rodney gave me this a year or so ago. He's a salesperson over a landscaping company. And this fit right in because the majority of companies I go to today do not have a sales plan. They allow their sales managers to do what they did last year to get what they got last year, which nobody's happy with anyway. And they say, well, gee, what's in a sales plan? We're going to talk about a marketing plan in a few minutes, but a marketing plan is objective strategies and tactics, and you can get the budgets, and it's not that hard to do. I host those all the time, but sales plans, revenue, units, profits, market share, sales organization, market definition, territory definition, target accounts, channel strategy, partners and alliances, sales costs, compensation, discounts and promotions, sales training, product training. That's only a partial list of what should be in a sales plan for the coming year. How many of you in the room have sales managers that have submitted a sales plan for this year? Raise your hand. We insist on, thank you, the 5 of you who raised your hands. And you did it kind of hesitatingly, which means, this means I've got something written, but it's not very good. This means I've really got it nailed. Well, I only saw these. I don't know how to tell you that. In any case, hardly anybody asks their sales manager to say, what are you going to do in the coming year? Well, I'm going to do what I did last year, plus 10%. Well, who are you going to hire? Where are you going to hire them? When are those new products going to be introduced? How are you working with marketing? How does your plan coincide with marketing's plan? And they're going to say, what plan? And say, well, when are we having sales training? Who are you going to have to replace this year? Just don't give me a forecast. Tell me when it's coming in, how it's coming in. What are you doing internationally? Give me that forecast. What are you going to be doing? Give me a written plan. Sales managers have not been asked to do this on a regular basis. The bigger the company, the more likely they are to do it. So I suggest it's not hard to figure out. It's not hard to even go up on the internet and search sales plans and figure it out. And ask your sales manager to submit a sales plan and tell them what you want on it. Not just revenue, but you want to find out how are you really going to bring in the sales this year. You need the intellectual capital to start thinking in your company because you can't do it all for them. You may try. I know entrepreneurs. A friend of mine once said, you know, the definition of an entrepreneur was, if there were 5 more people just like me, I wouldn't need the rest of you. And well, that didn't go over too well, did it? Anyway, I run into it every now and then. Let's take a look at the next one. No marketing plan. I go into company after company and I say, do you have a marketing plan? And they start looking around and then somebody comes up with, yeah, here it is. I was talking to a company that makes trash cans. It was a big business, great P&L. But their marketing plan was written on a piece of lined paper, and half the things were lined out, and he did it 2 years ago. And yet most of you, depending on the size of the organization, you're spending 2 to 20% of the company's yearly revenue on marketing, and you don't have a plan. Now, what's a plan? Well, a plan is goals. What's this year's goal? What's your objectives? What are your strategies? What are your tactics to accomplish it? What is your budget? How many leads are coming in? When are those products going to be introduced? You can create a marketing plan in 1 day with your companies. 1 day. You do a complete SWOT. From the SWOT, you decide what you have to do, and you go ahead and create your objective strategies and tactics. And if anybody wants it, I'll be happy to send you an outline of what it looks like. People pay me to do it all the time, but the reality is you can do it yourself. You just follow the outline. Most of these plans of advertising, branding, internet strategy, research, when's the product going to be introduced, you're creating a thinking atmosphere in your company. Now, you've got a marketing plan, you've got a sales plan, you're weeding the garden, you're starting to take a look at all the leaks that are happening in the company. What about quota enforcement? One of my personal favorites. The number of companies that I go to and talk to them, do you have quotas? Well, first of all, many of them don't have quotas. We'll talk about that later. But what about the quota enforcement? Bad breath, no breath, et cetera, et cetera. If you've got quotas, are you enforcing them? Well, not really. Why? Well, then I'd have to let somebody go. And then if I let somebody go, what would happen then? Then I wouldn't have any salespeople. It's as though you can't hire new salespeople. Then I'd have to train people. But are you happy with sales? No, I'm not happy with sales. But you can't have employees there if their work isn't being measured. You wouldn't live with that in manufacturing. Sometimes you live with it in marketing, which we'll talk about. But quota enforcement, you say you've got to sell so much per month. I've got to make payroll every month. The number of people that don't have actual quotas or soft quotas or yearly quotas. Yeah, we have yearly quotas. What's that? Yeah, we do a group hug at the end of the year if we make the numbers. And if we don't, then we just try again next year. Salespeople like to be measured. All real salespeople will be relieved when you give them a quota. They won't tell you that, but they'll be relieved. You have to give them a quota, and you have to measure it on a monthly basis. And you have to report on it. How'd that get in there? How'd that slide get in there? Oh, well, yeah. No quota reporting. The majority of companies that don't have any reporting on a monthly basis. They've got quotas, but nobody reports on it, which means they really don't have quotas. My philosophy is the easiest way to eat crow is while it's still warm. It gets a lot harder to eat when it gets cold. It doesn't swallow very well. It doesn't help to tell the salespeople at the end of the quarter you didn't make it in January or February and now this month, because now you've got 3 more months that you've got to measure them. It's a lot better to tell those salespeople I'm going to make it every month. I went to a company out here, and their average sale was $100,000 or $200,000. Salespeople brought everything in towards the end of the year. There were service contracts, and it was voice over IP, et cetera. Those salespeople, they just ran amok. They didn't have a sales manager. They just brought it in when they felt like it. And I said, well, we're going to start quotas, monthly quotas. But that's not the way we sell here. I said, well, you sell service agreements, you sell upgrades, you sell more licenses going in. Yeah, we do. Within 3 months, the salespeople were making their monthly numbers. Usually takes 6. It takes 6 months to start putting up monthly quotas, and they start making it, and you start reporting on it. There isn't an organization here, I don't care what you sell, that you can't ask those salespeople to make your monthly numbers. You may shift the numbers a little bit in a month. You may have high buying periods, low buying periods, whatever. But make sure they have quotas and make sure that you report on it on a regular basis. Remember that crow. Don't forget the crow. What about spending money on marketing? You know, the old Obermayer quote, half the money I spent on marketing is wasted. The problem is I don't know which half. It's 20 minutes. Thank you very much. I don't know which half. Well, the issue very often is so many of your marketing managers aren't measuring what they're doing anyway. They're creative types. They don't want to be measured. Now, I can be a smart aleck because for the first half of my career, I was a marketing manager, and I said I would never, ever go into sales until I got aggravated. Those salespeople were making all that money, and I wasn't. So I went to be a sales and a marketing manager, but I was a marketing manager that wanted to prove the return on investment. And I worked at Beckman, a $500 million company at the time, several billion now. Your marketing managers can prove the return on investment. I run the Sales Lead Management Association because I like it. I've written a couple books on managing sales leads. I like the subject, but I also know that if you create 1,000 leads, I know there's 450 buyers in there. You got a 25% market share, you're going to sell 125. If it's worth $5,000, 125 times $5,000, I know that's the revenue that's going to come in the next year. Stone cold facts. 45% of all the people who inquire are going to buy somebody's products. You want to increase sales activity. One of the ways you increase sales activity, increase marketing. The way you increase marketing and make it pay is you start measuring all your marketing dollars. What about proposals not followed up? You'll never break a horse if you stay sitting on the fence. Called in a company down here, in fact, 2 or 3 companies in the last year or so, and in fact, one of our serious consultants, and went in and talked to him, and we were sitting around a table and out in the office, and I said, well, what about your previous proposals? Well, how often do you quote? And he said, we got salespeople, we just churn out quotes. We just churn them out. And I said, well, how do you track them? And he went, and I said, what's this? And he said, that's the filing cabinet. That's where all the quotes go. I said, well, does anybody follow up with them? Follow up? If they want to buy, they call us. The trash can company, same thing. Quoted. We finally got somebody on the telephone with them that would take every single quote and say, here's your quote. How soon can we ship that for you? It's amazing. Sales went up because somebody said, how soon can we ship that for you? Proposals have to be followed up. It's amazing. You'd say, well, that's just the basics. Well, salespeople get so used to picking that low fruit, they don't go after the long haul. Remember I said 45% of all the inquiries turn into a sale within 12 months? That's because 15%, 10 to 15% of the people who inquire buy in 3 months, 26% in 6 months, 45% within a year. What does that tell you? The salesperson who gives up in the first 3 months only participates in about 10 or 15% of the sales. If you did nothing else when you go back home with your organizations, if you simply said, we will have 100% follow-up of all sales leads, I mean 3 phone calls, I want to talk to somebody, send out the email, send out the literature, we're not going to give up to the 4th phone call, your sales will increase in 90 to 120 days. And if the marketing people and the sales people don't want to do it, tell them I'll find somebody that will. If you don't know how to do it, figure it out. Your companies are too serious to be managed by people who aren't measuring what they're managing. Sales lead reports. Most of you, 80% of you have a CRM system. 15% have a marketing automation system to do the lead nurturing. 80% have a CRM system. Most of the time your CRM system, great majority of 45% are not happy with it. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. They're not happy with it. You should be looking as a CEO, believe it or not, like all your other metrics, how many inquiries did we get in this month? Because I've told you, 45% turn into a sale for somebody. Just working with a company president on the East Coast, Blacksburg, Virginia, and they weren't counting anything that came in. All the white papers, all the requests, they just went to the salesperson. If the salesperson felt like entering into the CRM system, they did. That was just a license, wasn't it, to steal? That was a license just to... Salesperson said, well, I didn't get a hold of him, I'll bury that one. Didn't get a hold of him, I'll bury that one. Well, all of a sudden, he's getting about 125, 150 inquiries a month, and he just didn't know what happened. Talk about sales leakage. Now they're following those up automatically. We gather all the names, follow them up automatically, and we're getting into deals that we were never getting into before because we weren't waiting. He's no longer waiting for them to turn around and come back to him. He's actually going after those deals and forcing the salespeople to do the follow-up because he looks at the sales lead reports and he looks at the follow-up off the CRM system. That's what the CRM system is there for. It's very easy to do. 75 to 90% of all the leads are not followed up. I was flying out of Los Angeles a couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago now. 4 or 5 years ago, it was Sunday morning, and I was standing at the ticket counter. I looked down at my shoes. They probably kind of look like they do now, and I said to the ticket agent, I said, is there a shine shop in the building? She said, well, it's Sunday morning. You can go downstairs. The barber shop's got somebody. Why don't you go downstairs, and you've got an hour and a half, 2 hours before the flight. So I went downstairs in LAX, and sure enough, there's the barber shop. I looked in the barber shop. It's all dark, but there was a light over in the side. I look over in the side, and there's a shine man. The barbers aren't in. The shine man's there. He's shining shoes, and there's 3 guys in there. 2 guys sitting in the chair, 1 guy waiting. I sat down. He just nodded. I went over and sat down. A couple of minutes go past, and a person puts his head inside the door, and he says, the barber's in yet? And the shine man said, nope, barbers aren't in yet. The guy left. This happened 3 times. 3rd time it happened, the shine man looked up, looked at the 3 of us, 4 of us sitting there, and he said, you got to show up to get the business. You don't show up, you don't get the business. And he went back to shining shoes. 4 of us looked at each other and said, aren't going to learn anything, we're not going to learn anything better today than what he just taught us. And we got a shoe shine to boot, and only cost $5. So, 100% follow-up. You will increase leads in 90 to 120 days. Guaranteed. Planning ahead. What does planning ahead mean? Let's see. I'm reminded of the quote that, from a planning ahead standpoint, it's a little bit like wearing gloves with button fly jeans. You know, when that happens, you've got to think ahead a little bit, right? And so, now, how does this match? Well, the quote was just too good to pass up. That's part of it. But most of you, when you've got sales reps and you're churning over that sales force, and guess what? A lot of you are just caught flat-footed. Somebody left. I don't know who else to call. The great company presidents and sales managers have that little Rolodex of people that they've been talking to for sales management jobs and salesperson jobs. Sales manager always knows he's got 2 or 3 people that he can call and start ticking through the list. People that he's met at networking meetings. Other salespeople that have come up to him and say, do you have an opening? Not yet, but I'm thinking about it. You use recruiting. Most of the time, if you don't plan ahead, if you got a 20 or a 30 person sales force and you're turning over 5 or 6 salespeople a year, 5 or 6 salespeople times 9 months, you figure out the sales productivity you're losing. It pays to hire a recruiter and get somebody in there as quickly as possible. When you don't plan ahead, you're just standing there with those gloves on, those button fly jeans, wondering how you're going to make this happen, all right? You're losing money by not planning ahead and having a stable of salespeople. I worked with a sales manager at this $13 million landscaping company out here in Anaheim, and Mike always had 3 or 4 people he was going to lunch with, talking to. He only had 6 salespeople, but he said, there's people who want to come work here, and I just keep these guys going. I know what they're doing, and sure enough, I hire about 1 a year. He said, but as soon as I've got an opening, I can get somebody in here within a couple of weeks. He doesn't have to run ads. He doesn't have to wait. He doesn't have to wade through all those resumes and what have you. He can stay on top of it and plan ahead. And he's going to lose a little bit because you're going to lose a little bit when you get some turnover. But he picks up months and months and months, 6 months of productivity just by getting somebody in the field right away. Now, what do you think the subject of this one is? She is one mean little dude, isn't she? Dudette? I was doing some interviews at a company, and I said, tell me about your sales meetings. And he said, you mean sales beatings? I said, sales meetings? I said, well, tell me about your sales meetings. He said, well, that's what we do every day. Our stand-ups are sales meetings. Our weekly sales meeting is a sales meeting. And in between, we get threatening emails saying we're all going to lose our jobs unless the quotas are met this week. So the reality is we were able to turn that around, even though the sales manager just loved the beatings. And he had a hard time adjusting to motivational meetings. Now, I believe in stand-up meetings for inside salespeople. And I believe in I'm working with some stand-up meetings with national sales forces where we meet for 10 minutes every morning and they find out what's going on. Sometimes we enforce these when quotas are not being made, and then we relax when they are being made and go back to once or twice a week meeting. But the main thing is the sales meetings have to be accountability meetings. I go through a little litany. I said, how many appointments did you do this last week? How many demos? How many phone calls? I ask them to set their criteria for me. What's the criteria for being successful in this company? So many appointments, so many phone calls, so many demos, et cetera. Okay, we're going to measure yourselves by that. How many of those things should you do on a weekly basis? They tell me. That's what we start measuring. Pretty easy to do. Takes 10 minutes at the start of every sales meeting. How did you do last week? What are you doing this week? Get salespeople to plan ahead. Be positive in your sales meetings. Are you on track or off track making quota? If you're off track, I'll talk to you later. I'm not going to bust you in front of everybody here. I'll talk to you later if you're off track. If you're off track, do you need some help? Tell me. Do you need the company president to come out and help close a deal, which is the equivalent of giving away 10% of the margin? But at least you got the deal, and you got to brag about it. But regardless, sales meetings and sales instead of sales meetings. The number of companies that don't have I figured out you got to stand here to make these slides change. The number of companies that don't have sales meetings are quite interesting. About 70%, you think would have them, but about 70% don't have them. They just, do you have sales meetings? Yeah, we do. When are they? I'm talking to the sales manager now. Oh, thank you very much. And he must have thought I needed it, and he was right. Yeah, we do them every 3 weeks, a sales meeting. Why? Most of the time it's because the sales manager doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to listen to the whining and complaining, and he doesn't, or she doesn't know how to run a meeting. Doesn't know that this is the coaching meeting. This is the halftime meeting every week. This is the 15-minute build-up. If the sales manager doesn't know how to run a sales meeting, just say, put in halftime meetings and into the internet, and you're going to learn how to run a halftime at a football game, and you're going to figure out how to run a good positive meeting. Because that's what it takes. The meeting is not to beat people down. The meeting is to pump them up, hold them accountable, pat them on the back. I talked to a salesperson yesterday who made quota, and I called him, and he said, hi, Jim. It was this kind of hesitant voice. I'm kind of busy. I said, yeah, I understand. And he said, what did you want? Because he thought there was something going on, I guess. And I just said, I just wanted to thank you for exceeding quota by 20%. And there's silence on the other end of the phone. He said, I've been here 5 years. And I said, yeah. And he said, nobody's ever called me when I made quota. Quite interesting, isn't it? Is he motivated now? Because considering I talked to the company president and the CFO and the head of operations, and I said, make sure you give him a call and tell him thank you because you need his numbers. Is he going to sell more the next week? Yeah. Yeah. So what we've got here is no CRM. No tree is too big for a dog to lift his leg on. It really gets down to most of you have CRM systems, but your salespeople complain about them. So you spend $50,000, get a CRM system, go through all the training, keep it for a year or two. People aren't all totally behind it. Your sales manager didn't like it, didn't enforce it, doesn't use the reports. The salespeople complain enough, and they said, if we get a new CRM system, we'll live with that one. So you get another one, and then what happens? The cycle starts all over again. You duplicated your money. So the very best CRM system that's out there today, the very best one you can buy, I'll tell you which one it is, because I deal with hundreds of them virtually through the Sales Lead Management Association. The best CRM system out there is the one that will be used by your salespeople. It can be difficult. They'll learn how to use it. But you have to enforce its use. Otherwise, all of the benefits fall to the wayside. All of the names slip through the cracks of the salesperson who just left. You can't measure the return on investment for advertising and marketing. You can't do the follow-up mailings. You can't do all of that falls apart with this great tool because the salespeople are lifting their leg on the thing on a regular basis, and it makes everybody uncomfortable, so you go off and spend a lot of money on another one. You wouldn't let anybody in manufacturing say, oh, yeah, that machine's not working. We really don't like it. Can we buy another one? It just wouldn't happen. To train them, make them use it. I have found a lot of companies are hiring people, but they don't test their candidates before they hire them. You can't tell how far a bullfrog would jump by the size of his feet. And when we interview salespeople, that's all we're looking at is the size of their feet, because they can talk pretty good, but you don't really know if they can sell. Right? Well, you got some grins up here. You two do this together or what? Testing salespeople is one of the first things I do when I come in. There's lots of tests out there. Hundreds of thousands of salespeople go through these tests, and you can see if they have the aptitude to sell your kinds of products. So I test 3 of the best salespeople in the company, and I use that profile to hire against. You know, the real benefit of this is it helps you avoid hiring your brother-in-law for sales. That's what it gets you out of that entirely, because they figure if there's nobody else, if I can't get a job anyplace else, I can go in for sales for my brother-in-law. So you get rid of that, and that is a big help to you. But the reality is if you test for those, a company I was working with a couple of years ago said one of the great things we've got here, I think he actually said the best, which was disappointing, was that we're actually testing all the salespeople when they come in, and we have a much higher retention rate because we're hiring people with the right attitude and mentality. If you've got a product that's a price and delivery and a commodity, you want a commodity salesperson. You don't want to buy bring a salesperson in that's used to selling a strategic sale, making a strategic sale, do you? A long-term sale. You want somebody that's going to close. At the same time, you don't want to put a commodity salesperson into a strategic sales situation because they're going to keep asking about closing, and you're saying you're in the second step of a 15-step process. You're just going to be frustrated. So you really need to get the right salesperson on board. President or sales manager, or both. Unfortunately, it's very difficult for you as a company president to also be a sales manager. You may have been the best sales manager the company ever had at one time because you started your company, or you were at another company. But very seldom can we continue to do that job which needs that daily. Let's face it, if they're inside salespeople or outside, you need somebody that's got the patience and the daily coaching, and most of the time you have neither the time nor the attitude anymore to do it. You just want them to go out and kill something. One guy said to me, he said, they know what they have to do. I don't have to coddle them. They know what they have to do. And you go to the salespeople and he doesn't understand us. He doesn't understand what we do, how we do it, how much time it takes. So it really comes down to there's a whole lot more to riding a horse than sitting in a saddle. You can sit in the saddle, but that doesn't mean you know how to ride or ride today. So think about it. Once you get that sales force up to 2 or 3 or 4 salespeople, go ahead and turn it over to a professional sales manager. Almost finishing up, Will Rogers said, and this is where I finished most of my Convene meetings this way, when I have done Convene. If you're riding ahead of the herd, somebody mentioned that yesterday, take a look back every now and then and make sure it's still there. So we've covered these areas of sales leakage. There's more in your organization. The point is, you'll see at the beginning of the presentation, it says, what do I want you to take away with? I want you to go back and say, we have marketing and sales leakage. I want to pull together my staff of people, and I want to figure out what that leakage is. It's different for each one of you. Now, in the next few minutes, you're going to sit at your tables, and I've listed the points of sales leakage, and I want you to talk to each other about other forms of sales leakage that might be occurring in your company.